স্পট এই রমজানে রাতের খাবার এবং সেহরিতে আপনাকে দেবে স্বস্তি। ভিশন রাইস কুকার, ডাবল পট, ডাবল স্বস্তি।
क्या हुआ? क्या हो रहा है भाई? वो क्रिकेट मैच चल रही है, खाली आवाज कर रहे बैठ के।
रईस واقع بس
شو اسوي انا الحين؟ ليه ما حد ياني؟
سلام عليكم.
عليكم السلام.
أرباب أنا نبيل مدير المسؤول.
عبد الله يريد مساعدة أرباب؟
مشكور عبد الله، العيد بحلها. المهم جيب لي حد الحين يصلح سيارة، لا حجة ولا ما حجة ولا ما يهمني، الحين شترة يا
عمر تعال.
ما ابي اسمع حجج.
أرباب هذا عمر مهندس زين وإيه سويت تسليس صار مال انتهين.
تفضل.
سوري أرباب، السيارة لازم أودي كرج.
الو طرش السيارة.
أرباب أنت ليش ما يجي سوا الحين وقت مالته، أنت ليش ما تحكي؟
narrative around distribution of vaccines and the basis is supporting it. It's hard not to be participating.
जिसमें तू भीतर और मैं भीतर राह दरिया नेकी से भर किसी की मुश्किल आसान कर कोई फर्क ना है तेरे दर पर.
When you get
أتواب أنت شو؟
in excess of 30 to 35 on a forward-looking basis. We've obviously seen a rotation
أنتوا ما خليتوني
into
أضيع أفطاري.
forward-looking basis.
كيف تبوني أضيع أفطاركم؟ أنتوا ما خليتوني أضيع أفطاري. يلا.
مهما كان الطريق صعبا فإنه ينيره للجميع. مهما كان الطريق صعبا فإنه ينيره للجميع.
In the past 6 months, as far as bringing in new investors, driving a culture and norms where doing the right things period comes first, bringing in a new management team, etc. There's a lot that we've done. But this is a company that knows how to execute. This is a service. Mobility as a service is something that's universal, that's needed in the world, and I just want to get back to doing
So
so.
interesting. You said true believers. Normally, true believers are the last possible people where you're able to change a culture. Can you explain a bit about that?
Well, I think that they understand that mobility as a service, bringing the cost of transportation down, making transportation services available to anyone and everyone on a local basis, and partnering with cities to be a solution to traffic, to pollution, etc. That is a mission that they all believe in. And I think that they, having seen what happened in 2017, to some extent, the crisis, the enormous crisis that the company has gone through, is a benefit because everybody at the company knows now that we need to change, that we need to break with the past as far as the way the company was run. We need to go from growth at any cost to responsible growth and growth in partnership with other players out there. That's clear, but now I've got to kind of get the company down to the normalcy of execution, of building great technology, and I think we're going to get there. It's still some tough sledding early on, but I absolutely think we're going to get there.
When you talk about execution, is profits one of the things you want to get? I think you lost $4 billion last year.
Well,
peanuts by the standards of...
Profits would help. So at some point, we absolutely have to become profitable, and that's part of the plan.
But do you have a kind of goal for that? Do you think that you should be profitable by 2022 or by 2020?
I think that we'll be profitable before 2022. This is the business itself.
Do you want to come back a bit closer, 2020?
Yeah, listen, it's not going to, I don't want to name a specific year, but this is a business that the core business, the ride-sharing business, can be profitable within 3 years. We will continue to make very aggressive investments in building out autonomy because we think that's a terrific opportunity for building out new technologies such as Uber Elevate, where near-term profitability is not a goal, but long-term growth is. So we will look to balance near-term profitability, but as a company, we will always be a company that makes big, bold bets and takes big risks.
To what extent, though, do you think that drive to become profitable fights against a little bit of this culture change? If you want to make... You talked about making money, but not at all costs. Do those two things...
Well, I don't think that profitability and culture are their issue. It's the company in the past was willing to make trade-offs as it related to how it did business, and I think was guilty of hubris, was guilty of thinking that they knew better than others, and I think that what we know now clearly is that breakneck growth can hide cultural issues, that there are no excuses for not doing the right thing, and that you do have to make trade-offs. And as a management team, we're specifically talking about those trade-offs that you have to make. We have to be a little more patient sometimes because working with governments, regulators, etc., sometimes takes longer, but in the end, you build a more lasting business. And so maybe what we went through was necessary, but we're here. We can control our actions from this moment onwards, and I think everyone at Uber from this moment onwards wants to build a great company, not only in terms of growth, but in terms of the kind of company anyone would want to work at.
Can I ask you one thing which you have got, a sort of hangover from last year, which is all the regulatory problems, and particularly all the cases against you. I think there are 6 criminal probes or whatever going on.
The lawyers are lining up outside the door.
Which one do you sort of think? Which one do you fear most? I suppose. Out of different things.
Listen, I think that all of them are serious issues, and my response is that we're going to be transparent and we're going to take responsibility for our actions in the past. I do think that there are certain circumstances where there was smoke but no fire, and I think as a company we have to defend ourselves and work within kind of the appropriate frameworks. And my goal is just to get beyond this stuff.
Some of these things like pricing policies, surely they go right to the heart of what Uber is, or am I wrong about that?
Yeah, I think they do, but I think that there's a way of being smart but transparent at the same time, and that's where we've got to take the company.
Take me through governments. When you talk to governments privately, do they talk any differently than they do publicly?
Governments?
Yes, governments.
I think that they are honestly a bit relieved with how we are engaging with them, because I think that the engagement is now real. I think they feel like we're out there, we're genuine because we've learned our lessons of the past, And I do think that we can take, for example, the data that we have in terms of traffic and in terms of movement of our drivers and riders, and we can use that data to partner up with cities in order to solve congestion issues, because congestion doesn't help anyone. It wastes enormous amounts of time for consumers. It hurts the environment. And I think that we are aligned with cities, for example, to partner with them in a fundamental way to solve these problems. And I do think that when these are conversations that a number of regulators and cities have wanted to have with us for many years, and I think we are really engaging with them at a depth that I think is going to create a real win-win going forward.
Do you think you were too confrontational on this before?
Yeah, I do. I think that the company was pushing growth. And listen, any innovator, to some extent, you know, the innovation is about questioning past kind of present practices. It's about breaking things, the Facebook breaking things. We just went a step and a half too far. And what I want to keep, hopefully, is the best of both worlds, which is the spirit of innovation, the spirit of can-do, etc., but the responsibility of partnership. We don't know better than you. We're actually going to work with you, of actually having dialogue and respect for our city partners, for regulators, and then continuing to take risks and continuing to do daring things. And I think we can accomplish that.
Imagine this audience here is a collection of mayors or a collection of city officials, and you want to depict, this is the Year Ahead conference, depict what the years ahead in this thing are going to be like. How far is driverless cars going to go? You talked just a few days ago about the idea there being flying cars in 10 years' time. Can you just give a description of what you think transport is going to look like?
Well, I think that we think there are three keys to transport and where the industry is going: autonomous, electric, and shared. And I think all three are necessary in order to get to the next level of city planning, etc. There are many cities where up to a fifth of the space taken in these cities is taken by parking and storing these cars. And so I do think that you need autonomous, you need electric, and you need shared. And I do think it's going to take some time. True autonomy for every single use case is some ways away. What we bring to bear is our developing autonomy, and we will have autonomous cars on the road, I believe, within the next 18 months, not as a kind of a test case, but as a real case out there. And over a period of time, we're going to bring autonomous transportation and feather it in with the non-autonomous transportation with drivers.
What does feathering in mean?
Feathering in
mean to a layman like me? Crashing.
Yeah, feathering in means if you're, for example, in Phoenix, and you make a request to go from A to B, which is what you do with Uber, there will be 95% of cases where we may not have everything matched perfectly, or the weather may not be the right weather, or there may be an accident on the road, or you may not have 2 or 3 ways of getting from A to B, where you may say, you know what, that's not an autonomous use case. We're going to send a driver to pick that person up. For 5% of cases, everything is going to fall into place. And we will send an autonomous car. The user will be able to pick, do you want, there's an autonomous car, yes or no? And we'll be able to service that A for B. That 5% is going to go to 10 and 15 and 20 as our computers and our algorithms learn more and more about what it takes to drive in a city in a real life situation. And every minute of every day, that driver, that computer is going to get better and know Phoenix better and better and better. And in 5 years, we'll have the perfect driver in Phoenix. We will have to retrain that driver in every single city. We're going to have to build out 3D maps of these cities, and it will take time. but over a period of time, you essentially have a driver who becomes the perfect driver. It'll take 10 to 15 years, but that's the feathering in that I'm talking about.
Will a child born today, will they ever need to learn how to drive?
A child born today? No, I don't think so.
So within sort of 20 years from now, we will.
I don't think so. Listen, I hear some groans.
And also,
listen, I heard a couple of groans. 1.3 million people die from car crashes every year. 1.3 million people die from car crashes every year. That doesn't count an estimated 20 to 50 million people that are injured. This is actually a public safety issue. If you look at cars, 96% of cars. 96% of time, cars are sitting there not being used. It's a huge amount of pollution that's caused by these cars being in the road, and a huge amount of wasted time. So the safety is there. Electrification is absolutely key, and sharing these platforms is going to allow us to be much safer and also put our assets where they add value.
It's quite interesting because when you first came in, I remember you sounding somewhat more skeptical about self-driving cars. You've been converted. Is that a?
The choir has spoken, and I'm listening. It's pretty exciting technology out there, but again, it will be a hybrid technology for some period of time.
What about flying cars? That came as a slight surprise.
Yes, that's a great project that we're working on. It's called Uber Elevate, and it is actually about battery technology.
It would have helped a lot of people here.
I know. I wish that I was available. We'll launch it here if we can. But battery technology is allowing us to have multiple rotors on planes, or helicopters, if you want to call them that. These rotors that are much smaller will be much quieter than helicopters are, much quieter, much safer. If you add sharing into the equation, you can actually get the economics of going from A to B. We think within 5 to 7 years to a place where normal people would think about taking these flying cars. That'll be the beginning, and then it's about scaling. And we're working with a number of partners.
Do you think the regulation of flying cars? I've heard some proponents of it argue that it might be easier than it has been on driverless cars, because driverless cars you have to deal with existing roads, existing everything. Flying cars, essentially, you're going into unconquered space.
I think that mayors that are forward-thinking understand that traffic and pollution are a real issue, and I think flying cars can be a significant solution to traffic issues in cities. And these cars, to start with, they're going to be very specific. They'll be kind of highways in the air. There'll be very specific routes that these flying cars go on. They're not going to be able to take you to your backyard and land in your backyard. There'll be these skyports. So there'll be very specific routes that you go on. And I think if you build a regulatory framework that has that kind of structure around it, I think you get to a better solve.
Can I drag you back somewhat reluctantly back to the real world? But you have Rajiv Misra, who came in with you from SoftBank.
Yes.
He's going to become a director. Last week, he said that Uber should focus on repairing its market share in the US and on key European markets, rather than going to new ones. Do you agree with that? Is that the way you look at Uber?
I think one of the fundamental strengths of Uber is the global scope that we have. This is
you had that motto, everywhere. Everywhere for everyone.
Yeah, everywhere for everyone.
Do you want to make it some places for some people?
No, we like the everywhere for everyone. It's much sexier than some places for some people. That's
telling me.
Just not interesting. I do think seriously though the global scope that our company brings is important. Our being able to build technology that we can amortize essentially everywhere in the world is hard, but it is part of the fundamental value that we introduce. So I would look at Uber very much as a global brand. That said, we're going to look at all opportunities, but at this point we are leaning forward, and 2018 for us is going to be very much a lean forward year for the company.
But without, I'm not trying to create new boardroom tension at Uber, but that would appear that SoftBank is keen on a more limited idea, whilst you're keener on everywhere for everyone.
Well, listen, SoftBank is a very important shareholder. They're our largest shareholder, and many of our shareholders have opinions over what's the right thing to do. Ultimately, the governance of the company is going to be at the board, and we'll have those discussions at the board, and we'll set our long-term strategy, and then execute on it.
One of the things which Uber played, perhaps not very fortunately, a role in was the whole sexual harassment questions and everything to do with that. I suppose one very obvious question: do you think that you have solved that part of the culture? But secondly, do you think that this time this is a real revolution and it's going to stick?
I think that what was happening at Uber was serious, and I think that while what Uber went through was difficult, I think the Susan Fowler blog was probably one of the best things that happened for Uber, and it certainly started a movement that's an incredibly important movement of the company. I'd be reticent to say that it's solved.
Yeah.
But it's not an endemic issue within the culture of the company, and I think the company has learned, and I think the company took very harsh and appropriate steps to make sure that that kind of behavior is absolutely clear, that that kind of behavior is not accepted in any way, shape, or form of the company, regardless of where you are, regardless of if you're a great performer or not. So I think we're at the right, as a company, but I think in general, we are not where we need to be in terms of women in senior positions, making sure that we're welcoming of women in technology, and we help women really build their careers within our company. There's a great kind of bottoms-up energy there, but we're not where we need to be, and we have a lot of work ahead of us.
On the issue of, you talked about the top performers, is that looking back, and also I suppose looking forward for many of the people in this room, because there are a lot of people's businesses which have been affected by this. If you had to give lessons to other people who are now looking at this issue perhaps more seriously than they have done before, is the really bad issue, and I suppose I'm thinking in some ways about the media industry in this, is that giving top performers more room for maneuver or whatever, or more discretion than people thought? Is that top performers need to be treated the same as everybody else?
I think they absolutely need to be held accountable. One of the really valuable lessons that I got early in my life was actually through Jack Welch, and he said, it's very tempting to allow top performers to misbehave in any way, but for me, he was talking about being aligned with the CEO. Sometimes you allow top performers, the tendency is, well, let them some kind of behavior that is not the right behavior because they're so good. And what Jack told me very early on is that it's the top performers who are problematic culturally that are the most dangerous, because they have followership within the company, because people look up to them. So he's like the dumb person who is bad culturally. He's not the problem, because everyone says, well, that's a dumb person, so who cares? It's the smart person who has followership, so it is incredibly important to actually be held to account more radically than anyone else, because they're the ones who have followership at the company, and they have to set the example. So for me personally, that has absolutely guided how I've managed. Expedia was a company that had, excellent cultural values, and one of the first things we did at Uber was to go out and reset our cultural values, and we call them norms, because to me, it's not just these values that you put on the wall and kind of people stare at it, and it's all nice. It's about behavior, and we set out to change behavior at Uber, and I think that the company was thirsting for it, and we are starting on a path, and I believe it's going to be a positive path.
An inevitable question, I hope you won't regard it as a cheap shot, but you talked about smart people who have followers throughout a company. I mean, Travis would seem to be the epitome of that sort of figure. Is that? Do you think of him as being in that category of people that Jack Welch was talking about?
I think, listen, Travis was the CEO of the company, and he had incredible followership, and he was held to account, right? I mean, he's no longer the CEO of the company, and he's a board member. He's a big investor, and so he's absolutely going to play a part on the board. But we've also been very clear as a company that we do have to make a break with the past, with how we behaved as a company, and to some extent with the new CEO being a very different kind of a CEO. So in the end, you have to be held accountable, and I think that Travis was held accountable, and at this point, he's a board member and a constructive one at that.
Around the world now, where do you see the next competitors to Uber? You've obviously got Lyft breathing down your neck.
Yes.
Where else did they come from?
Well, I think that as you move into a world of autonomy, the position of the car manufacturers, the position of, for example, Google, who's developing Waymo and Waymo autonomous technology, you're going to get a lot of players interested in the space. And a lot of people think about Uber and ride sharing as a significant enterprise, and it is. But the fact is that we account for less than 1% of miles driven on the road now. When autonomy comes in, that number over the next 10 years is going to be closer, I believe, to 15 to 20%. So, because we're not yet a true alternative to car ownership, and I believe that as you bring autonomous and you bring the price of mobility down and make it available to everybody, everywhere, then we become a real alternative to car ownership, and that really opens up the market for us, but it also opens us up to many more competitors.
And is Google at the forefront of those competitors at the moment?
Google is one of many. I think that they've developed very strong autonomous technology, but what we think, which is exceptional, is having autonomous technology and the network under one roof, which allows us to use autonomous in a very practical way, nearer than you think.
There's an inherent attraction to light and being human. And I think on a very deep psychological level, light is this way in which we experience the energy surrounding us in a very personal manner. My name is Matt Dilling. I'm the founder of Light Bright Neon Studio, and we manufacture, produce, and restore to the glass shop.